Hello, happy week 4 of the Orienta Shawl Knit Along with Malabrigo and our beautiful, beautiful sock yarn. I am loving, if you're on the Facebook page and you've been posting your pictures, awesome. Thank you. It is so cool to see. And actually, I saw the post on Instagram Malabrigo just did either it was yesterday or maybe this morning that had different color combinations as well. It was gorgeous, just gorgeous. So great pattern, great colors, and hopefully you had a lot of fun. So before we get started, any questions right off the bat? Last week, I know we kind of covered a lot with the stitch count. I have seen some stitch count questions online. We moved from increasing to that even body section of not increasing our stitch count, but we're shifting our stitches to the physical right of the stitch marker. I see, oh, Hen, you might a name change. Thank you. There we go. I'd love to see a show of hands. Who has already finished the shawl? Who's in the even body section? Yeah. Who has not only finished a shawl, but made more than one? There are quite a few. I saw someone out there that made like four. It was amazing. Just flew through them. So today we are going to go over the ending. We're going to talk about how to wear the shawl. Because I do get that question a lot of when we have these kind of asymmetrical triangle shawls, what's the best way to wear them in a flattering, not only flattering way, but also a cozy way, and also a way that doesn't fall off when we move, when we go through life. Also, we are going to talk about ending that even body section. What happens when we get to the that our stitch marker in those last three stitches? We're going to do that last little decrease. So we're going to take our stitch count from 184 to 183. We're going to talk about why we do that. And then also the pickups and how to do those pickups and make them look make them look nice. What to kind of look for when you're picking up stitches. I've heard over the years a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't like picking up stitches. I always get a stretch or a hole or a gap or whatever." And there is a little bit of an art form. You gotta look for a specific spot of the edge stitch in order to pick it up in a clean way. So we're gonna go through that. And then Janet had mentioned sewing in. Before that, we will bind off. I'll show you my favorite way to bind off, and also the pattern touches on a specific way to bind off too. Susan, how long will the recordings be available? I think they're on YouTube. And are they indefinite? Yes, they are. They are indefinitely on YouTube. And are they on the blog yet? Or sorry.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the blog
Okay.
post yet.
Okay, cool. So, definitely on YouTube, so you'll be able to get those. Another question that came up that was really interesting, and actually Hen and I discussed kind of the design around it because, as you know, I design and Hen designs as well. And when we discuss designing in, making a shawl or an accessory or something, and I talk about this in one of my courses. We look for form and function. We look for how it will be accessible to the knitter, to you guys reading it and working it. And a question came up of how to make the shawl longer. And so we're going to talk about the options. If you choose at the end of this one to make it longer, you can. I'm going to show you how. And then if you choose to make another shawl, where the different areas of changing not so much changing the shape, but changing the length of it, which inevitably will change a bit of the shape. You are going to have a bit of yarn left over. We discussed this last week. So this is, oh, dropping yarn here. This is your main color. So there's a good chunk of it left. And then your contrast color. So if you are choosing to grow your shawl, you definitely have some yarn to work with. All right, so here we go. Oh, one more thing. At the end, and this is actually, I can't believe I almost didn't mention it. My personal favorite part is I will, towards the end, I will stop the recording for anyone that, if you don't want to be recorded, that's why I'm going to stop it. And then take off all of our mute and allow us to kind of do a gallery walk. So if you want to show your shawl, we'll go ahead and spotlight you and you can show your shawl. You can tell us what colors you used and maybe your experience with it. So, yay. Here we go. So, as we get to, and I'm gonna take off my shawl here, although it was giving me some nice warmth, we have a bit of a breeze coming through my back windows. In this even body section, and I posted on Facebook yesterday because I did see a couple messages of kind of the I'm trying to be nice here. Kind of the monotony. How about we say that? The monotony of going through garter. It's, the same knit stitches over and over and over, although we are changing colors. And it's neat to see how some people are changing colors in different frequencies, doing the BYOD, which is a lot of fun being your own designer. Um, but I also posted on like how to kind of keep intention while you're knitting with a stitch that you repeat over and over and over again, like garter. And so definitely if you're on Facebook, go in and check that out. But it really was just helping you keep an intention with each row, a word to remind you with each row. So, oh, thank you. I was looking at the chat. As you get to the end of your even body section, this is actually not where you would grow the shawl or make it longer because you're getting to a point that looks like this. Your midline has, the midline actually doesn't shift. We're shifting the stitches over to the right side of the midline. And you're going to get to a point where you have this edge hanging down to the left. And then these stitches right here, all 184 of them are on your needles. And as you work across and then you get to that midline, you have that decreased stitch. So here's what it looks like on a smaller scale. Ah, my yarn all situated here. So here's kind of what it looks like, and it's um funky. It feels funky looking because you have this, increase down here that we did for so long with our lace, and then this whole body section right here, and then we knit across, and what do we do with those three stitches? Well, we're going to continue to decrease in order to take this edge and this decrease because it brings fabric together. You're literally turning three stitches into one. What that does is it actually will help pull up the side of the fabric. And the decrease used, let me just make sure I double check it here, is the same one you've been using, the SK2P. So you're going to slip, and you can drop your stitch marker at this point, or your stitch marker will be right here where my thumb is indicating. You will slip, you will knit two together, you will knit, and then pass that slip stitch over like that. And again, that stitch kind of gives a nice little X, which I think was quite pretty working along throughout that even body section. And so now this looks a little funky. Really, really cool and innovative. The idea of taking these edge stitches, and now we're going to do this. So we have this stitch, the last stitch we knit right here on our needle, and then we're going to take all of these, which I think equals 94, and bring them up like this. To be perfectly honest, to be honest, I don't think there is a perfectly honest. To be honest, I did not count. So when I was doing so here's where I ended, my midline right there. And I knew that I was going to be picking up these edge stitches. I also knew that the edge stitches ended at the end of that lace repeat right here. I was picking up everything that was garter. And so you can go in and count, and I did that afterwards, and it does work. The numbers do work. But what you're really going to do is just pick up each one of your garter bumps. So a garter bump is the up and down, so like the river and the rainbow, the smiley and the frown, whatever, however you want to view it, like this yellow, how you see the under and the over, that is, and when I say under and over, this is what I'm referring to, the under stitch and the over stitch. Those are two rows. The verbiage that can sometimes get a little bit confusing in knitting, those two rows are referred to as a, meaning one, garter bump. Okay. So as we pick up these stitches, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the garter bump as we go through. And that's where we're going to pick them up. So make sure I saw a post. Someone posted about doing a fourth repeat of the garter lace section. Any thoughts on how much longer that would make the shawl since I'm not to week 3 knitting? So I haven't done that, so I can't speak to yardage as in regards to yarn. I know that wasn't your question, but the repeats themselves are measured the same since the rows are the same. So with a measuring tape, you'll be able to tell how much longer this way it will be by taking your midline, bottom of your midline, and going to the top of your lace, like that. So it's just about 7.5 inches. So if you do one more repeat, you'll get about 7.5, one more repeat of the full lace and increased garter section, you'll get about 7.5 inches. But if you are thinking about doing that just for different sections, you obviously, like if you wanted to add a whole color block of a different, maybe you have a scrap yarn of Malabrigo sock that you wanted to throw in the middle right there before getting to the even body section, you just have to measure out what you've already done and use the midline as your example. Okay. So to the pickups. I'm going to zoom in, hopefully not get too fuzzy here. And because we're using that because we're using that garter bump on the edge, we've talked a lot about adding different edges, and if you chose to do that, that's fine. If you didn't add an edge, you're going to see the natural little kind of hump that the garter creates on the edge of the fabric. We're going to use that as our guide. Now, when I pick up stitches, I don't use my other needle in my hand. I know that some people do. I find that just using the right hand needle and using my hand tends to be the easiest way to go about things. So with that, manipulate your fabric a little bit and find that little garter bump. And here's where mistakes happen during pickups. Our mind wants to go to the easiest spot. It really does. And the easiest spot is like this. That will create a hole. That strand right there is not very sturdy. And even below it, if you go below and try to get 2 of the strands like this, that's not very sturdy. So if you go in, wrap around, pull through, yes, you picked up a stitch, but look, you've also created a hole. Now, form and function here. You could BYOD. If you want, because we have eyelets in the lace, it kind of looks like an eyelet without doing a yarn over. If you wanted to have an edge with little eyelets, absolutely you could do this. So you could take something that, in knitting, it's funny, we will do a stitch and be like, oh, that was a mistake, but it actually is a real stitch in another in another project. So you can take this pickup that creates a space, creates a hole, and make it as a bit of a design. If you did not want to do that, however, if you wanted kind of stretching out my yarn a lot here. If you want a more sturdy pickup, you want to look for the stitches that have been worked together the most. So if you think about knitting in general, each stitch is held together by the stitch above it, below it, and on either side of it. That's what holds it together. That's literally where the phrase tight knit community comes from. Everything supports each other. So when you look for that garter bump, you want to get into the garter bump like that. And I use my left hand to pinch the fabric, wrap around, and pull through. So there's one, there's another one, go in. And you can feel it. Like you kind of get like a little tug as you push in. You know that you're in a secure spot. And so you're going through and you're looking for each row. I'm sorry, each like the combination row that creates one garter bump and the little edge nubby thing that's on the end of it, like that. See how it almost looks, I hope you can see this. It almost looks like a pretzel. Let me get my little cable needle here. It's not really grabbing two loops. It's grabbing the interchange of the rows. So is it fuzzy? A little bit? Okay, there we go. So you have a stitch that goes like this and down and around and over. What that's doing, it's moving from one row to the next, like literally when we turn our work. And so we're looking for this, like the hole in the middle of the pretzel. So down and around, or it kind of looks like a little heart. You go in, around, pull back, go in. I have some gaps in here, some stretchy parts, because I've been using this little swatch for the past month to kind of show things and manipulate it a little bit. Okay, and now I'm at the end. So in the pattern, and now you can see as you've picked up all of these stitches, now you have a triangle. You no longer have that like strange quadrilateral. You have an asymmetrical triangle. And it's just really, really cool how that worked out. And then that midline, separates you're just knitting in a row. This is what's so magical about knitting is you literally were just going back and forth on a needle and then you get this movement in there, which just is very, very fun. At this point, the pattern says to turn to the wrong side and then do your bind off. Okay, I will show you how to do that. However, if you wanted to lengthen your shawl, now would be the time to do it because you have a piece that is in a position to grow without changing the formal structure of it. If you added a slip stitch to each border, you still need to pick up the stitches. You're not going to bind off the live stitches because remember, you're in that weird shape. So if you didn't pick these up, all of these stitches would be down on the side. You still need to pick up stitches. You're just going to pick up right underneath your slipped stitches. So if you wanted your shawl to be longer, you can purl back. I'm sorry, you can, well, I guess you could. You could knit back and continue with garter, knitting back and forth with all of these stitches, and it would grow this way. You can BYOD if you wanted to purl back and then knit back and purl back and give yourself like a stockinette end. Stockinette curls, so keep that in mind. You can play around with your colors. You can play around with the stripes of doing alternating stripes in a different way. This is really a cool opportunity if you would like your shawl to be longer, to add that extra yarn. If you are keeping it as is, and it is quite a lengthy shawl as it is, now is where you would bind off. But before I do that, are there any questions about doing that extension? No? Okay.
Jill,
So, oh, yes.
I just wanted to say that when a few years ago when I did the temperance shawl, it's very similar in construction to this. And when you got to the point of binding off the stitches, they did not suggest even picking up the stitches on the side. And, when I look at my shawl, I'm thinking probably would have looked a lot better if they had picked up the stitches on the side the way you did on this one.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the temperance shawl, and yeah, I think that was maybe five-ish.
Yeah,
That was a while ago. And it did have that same kind of big garter
yeah,
section in it. And that is something you could do that. Absolutely. It's kind of designer's idea, choice, form, and preference to why they chose to do it that way.
yeah. I would have to rip back, and I really don't at this point. I'm not going to do it. But I think if I had known this at the time, that I would have done it this way.
Okay. Yeah.
Look, it looks really nice.
Yeah, it is a very you don't realize I even when I went through, reading the pattern before knitting it and I got to that point, I was like, what do they mean? Turn it to the side. And then I looked at
Yeah,
pictures and I said, how is that gonna work? And then trusting the process, the process of knitting, being open to
right.
it, I got there and then I was like, oh, all these light bulbs went off. I'm like, oh, that is so cool how it just
It
turns
is.
that. So yeah,
Yeah, I
very,
agree.
very neat. So let's look at the bind off. So in the pattern at the end, on the pattern page, a few rows up from where it says end of week 4, the directions say to bind off all stitches with your main color as follows. Knit 2 together through the back loop, slip the stitch purlwise back onto the needle and repeat this. So this is, if you're not a fan of, well, I was gonna say if you're not a fan of the feeling of binding off, I'm sorry because you've been doing it. You've been doing it kind of this whole time when you do the slip stitch over for that decrease. A bind off essentially is passing the stitch over. And again, do the bind off that works best for you. The very specific thing about uh the knitting through the back loop, however, is we're binding off on the wrong side. And, we talked last week about having that kind of sexy backside in the fact that it is a very cool pattern that garter makes when you alternate stitches, or when you alternate yarns. And the lace wrong side looks nice too. But when you bind off on the wrong side, what you're going to do with this knit through the back loop technique is actually push. So I'm looking at the wrong side right now, and it's like, okay, I can see a bind off right here. But when you look at it from the right side, you see a much cleaner bind off. It actually kind of pushes the stitch in the direction that you want it to go. So I'll show you what that means or what that looks like. So 2 stitches, you knit through the back loop like this. and make sure your yarn is in the appropriate place. Knit through the back loop like that. Like that. And then you're going to slip this stitch back onto the needle and then knit through the back loop. I find just like what I'm doing right now, I twist my hand like this to make it a little bit easier to get that stitch, get the needle into both of those stitches. Come through like that, and then put the stitch back on the left needle. Go into both stitches, wrap around, come through, and kind of looking at the anatomy of the stitches here. Make sure that doesn't drop. When you knit through the back loop, you're always taking, or when you knit two together, you're always taking one stitch and laying it on top of another stitch. When you knit through the back loop, it's forcing these stitches to face this way, like this part of the fabric. It's not facing the front of the fabric, which in this case, the front is the wrong side. It's facing the right side of the fabric. Like that, and then put it back on. This gives you a very clean and somewhat stretchy fabric like this, or bind off. If you find, so I'll show you what it looks like on the front side, on the right side, like that. If you find that you tend to be a little bit more of a tight binder offer, that would be me. I tend to be very tight with my bind off. I like to do a stretchy bind off. So I'm going to switch mid-range here. I'm going to switch mid-row and show you what my stretchy bind off looks like. So I'll take this stitch, it's already been knit, keep it on the right needle. And then I bring my yarn to the front to yarn over, and I can knit two together this way or keep with the same motion of knitting through the back loop. Like this. Oops, I split my yarn. There we go. And then pull down on the fabric so you have room to get your needle in, and bring the yarn over stitch and the regular stitch over and off. So yarn over, and then because I'm on the wrong side, I'm going to knit through the back loop like this and like this. And you'll see the difference in the bind offs in a moment. And this one also works because you're incorporating a yarn over into your bind off. That's what gives it the stretch, but it also gives it a little bit of space. So let me do this so I don't lose my stitch. And it's kind of nice because then with that little space, you're also mimicking the spaces that you have with the eyelets. So you have a bit more of a flexibility. So you can see right here to here was the standard knit through the back loop, and here to here was the stretchy. So you can see the difference in the two. Let me catch up on the chat here. Are you using a larger needle in your right hand? I'm not. That is something that some people do, is when they bind off, they'll use a larger needle. I don't. I find that when I pull down on the fabric, that gives myself enough space to stretch out my stitches. Janet, if an extra lace section is added where there will be increases included, so the lace in the stripe section will end up with, yes, it will. You'll end up with more than 184 stitches. Yes, and keep in mind that those extra stitches that are added, if you add extra repeats to the increase sections of the shawl, every right side row you start increases by 2 stitches more. So both the length and the width will increase. Yes, it will. All right, wrong side. Here we go. Get my yarn in the appropriate place, get my needles in the appropriate place. I always wonder, I think about this a lot, where your mind goes when you're knitting. Whenever I knit, I bring my right needle when I'm on corded needles. I bring the cord always this way. So like the cord is between me and my work. And then I know some people do this and bring it behind. Feel free to pop into the chat while I finish binding off. Which are you? Are you a front cord or are you a back cord person? It's not right or wrong. Hannah's front too. There we go. I think we're like even Steven with back and fronts right now. Total preference, whatever works best for you.
What
Hi,
about
Jill.
what about the Icelandic bind off for this?
You could use the Icelandic bind off. I haven't done that one in a while. The Icelandic bind off works really well with garter, but it tends to, because you're on the wrong side, this just gives you a little bit nicer of a stitch definition of your bind off on the right side of the work. Whenever you want,
Jill.
yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, lots of us have lots of stashes using the same brand yarn but a different thickness. Would you have to change the needles, different sizes? Yeah, the pattern would probably stay the same. It's just, oh, what are your thoughts?
Um, So, there are some patterns, some shawl patterns that, and we're specifically talking shawls here, so I don't want to lead anyone astray in the thought of like garments, like fitted things.
Mhm.
When it comes to shawls, a lot of times we can use different yarn weights to make the shawl, uh, meaning make the same pattern, but you do have to take into account the needle size and also the how much yarn, the yardage of what you will need. So
Uh,
I find that when I'm working a shawl with fingering yarn, I'm anywhere between a size US 3 needle to a US 5 needle. This one went up to a US 6 needle, which gives it that kind of fun drapiness. And we discussed that a lot in week 1 on the recording. I find that sport weight, I tend to fall between a size US 5 and a US 6. On DK, US 6 to sometimes even up to a US 8, depending on the thickness of um the yarn, but I like a DK on a size 7 needle. And then worsted weight yarn, anywhere between a size US 8 up to a US 9 or 10. And then from there, I wouldn't go much bulkier unless you have a specific pattern asking for bulky yarn.
Okay, because I love the brand. You know, all the different weights. They're really luxurious, to knit and everything else, and they look so well when you finish.
Mhm. Yeah, and I find it to be a lot of fun. Again, this kind of falls into, I'm always encouraging people to play and practice. And when you play and practice on a swatch, you can really figure out which yarn works best for you, what feels best in your hands, and what needle sizes are appropriate for the yarn that you're using. And a lot of that also is tension. If you are a tight knitter, you might need to go up a needle size. If you're more of a loose knitter, you would go down to a smaller needle size. But that's kind of just getting to know you, getting to know your own knitting style.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So now to end the shawl, we have our little last stitch here. What do we do with it? How do we work it? Let me clear the decks, get my tapestry needle out. This is not my favorite tapestry needle, but it'll do. I always give myself a good sail to work with. And then a mistake happens a lot right here. We tend to just pull the yarn and then loop it through. I recommend kind of taking some time And our yarn will want to twist. Do you see how it has that little twist in there? It'll naturally want to do that. But that will make for a thicker knot. And not a huge fan of knots in knitting, unless it's a bobble and meant to be there. So what you want to do is kind of look at the anatomy, look at the architecture of the stitch. I turn to the right side here, and I can see my legs of my stitch are straight. And then rather than bring the tail around to go through this way, that will also make for a thicker knot. We want to pull because the tail is coming out of the back right here. You can see this way. You just want to make as smooth of a transition as possible. So keeping the yarn in its natural state, push through this way. Now, another mistake that happens, and if anyone's ever done embroidery, like that trick where you wrap the yarn around and then you kind of like do one of these things to make a knot with it and you pull it, you kind of never know where the knot's going to end up. This is similar. If you just start to pull on this tail, your knot's going to end up somewhere. And it might not be as close to the work as you want it to be. We want it to be close to the work. So what you're going to do is as you're pulling, you're also going to take, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed. I'm right-handed, so I'm pulling with my right hand. And I'm taking the two fingers of my left hand and I'm pushing the loop down. I'm pushing the loop down into the fabric. Sometimes I even take the loop and go over the fabric, depending on what the stitch looks like. And we want that stitch to be as close to the fabric as possible before we tighten it. You'll still have a knot there, but it will be as close to the fabric as possible. To weave in, take your tapestry needle. And it's really fun to weave in with garter because it has those up and down stitches. See how and this is just due to the nature of the fabric because I bound off this way, but I have momentum of the edge going like this. So you can kind of see this little edge gap right there. I'm going to look for that and I'm going to get rid of it. So instead of going back this way, which will accentuate that edge gap, I want to pull this down like that. And I have to say, weaving in is trial and error. It's really just looking ahead of time, kind of reading your stitches and looking for what will be the best way. See how I just pulled that knot closer together? So now it looks like it belongs just as a solid edge. Weaving in is trial and error. It's finding tight stitches, not losing your tapestry needle. I find going along the edge helps until you can get to your garter stitches. I tend to be a weaver who will weave until something else distracts me. I weave way too much. You don't need to do it as long as I do. Turning to the wrong side. Gonna go in. What do you hate about weaving in, Anna, if you don't mind sharing? Is it just the monotony of it, or? I used to not like weaving in. I've found my groove with it, which is nice, but a little bit of a story here. I used to work for a high-end designer when I lived in Boston, and I would do some production pieces. I did mostly teaching, but I did some production pieces for them. And when the models would come in for their photo shoot, there was one model who was standing there and she was posing, but something was bothering her in the fabric. And finally, she pulls a tail. She pulls a strand out from the armpit area, and then the owner was like, "Well, Jill made that one," because I always missed weaving in a tail. So that was like I didn't mean to, but I always did. I always missed it. So finding the tightest one. Now here's when you know that you're really good and to go with your weaving. You can't see it for one. And two, when you pull on it and you feel the fabric between your fingers on the other hand, you no longer feel the pull. Like if you pull this and you feel it come through here, that means it's not tight enough. But once you feel it that it's not moving. It's tight, good to go. Hope there's no more questions because we're good here. I'm joking, but I can't undo it. Cut as tight as you can to the fabric. Do that before you block, and you're good to go. Oh, tiny little swatch. Cute. All right. Every time I think I'm done weaving, a new tail magically appears. It does. It's like they multiply. I don't know what happens there. They're all watching Hallmark movies. So, all right. How are we feeling? Good? Good. Okay, then, since now we have our shawls, thumbs up, thumbs up. Let's talk about how to wear them. Okay, so there are lots of like shawl pins and cuffs and all those. It is like a little Barbie doll shawl. All the pins and cuffs and stuff, and those are great. I like them a lot. I prefer cuffs over pins. That's just my personal preference. If you're not sure what a shawl cuff is, it's usually a leather thing that comes together and like makes a clasp. And so the idea is that you can secure your shawl with one of these. So what I like to do, especially with asymmetrical triangle shawls, these are my favorite shawls to both make and wear. I only knit, literally, I have only knit one equilateral triangle shawl and I never ever wear it. I find that it gets too bunchy. And the point always points to something I don't want it to point to. So I find that the asymmetrical shells tend to be the most flattering. Move out of the way here. I'm quite tall, but I think you can see here. So when you hold up your shawl, I like to use that hypotenuse edge, so the longest edge of the shawl. And kind of the most modern way to take to wear this is to take that long edge of the shawl around your neck and then bring the other sides down like this. And the cool thing about an asymmetrical shawl shape like this is you have these edges that can come down and they can lay naturally, or you can play around with them. You can tuck them in, you can tie them together underneath. You can tighten your shawl by pull. I feel like I'm a flight attendant. You can tighten your shawl by pulling on the pulling on the strands. You really can kind of play around with it however you like. This is also where that shawl cuff comes into play. If you have, again, if you wanted to tie it, you can, or you can cuff it like that, whatever works. Another great way to wear a shawl like this, and I do this actually, I wear my shawls like this when I'm knitting, is kind of classically draped around the shoulders. Now, the great thing about that is you get that shoulder coverage, you get that feel of the hug, which is always nice. You really get to see the decorative nature of the shawl when you wear it like this. And you have a pretty good handle on it not falling off of you. If you are a bra wearing person, I find that using a tight shirt or using your bra, tucking it in at this point can also be very helpful. If you didn't want those long edges coming down, you just kind of tuck them in and you're good to go like that. This is actually, when I go out, if I want to look fancy, this is what I do. I always have a shawl with me. You can ask my husband. It's very, very odd if I don't have a shawl in my bag or one in the car. My favorite way, and I do live in a cold weather place, my favorite way to wear a shawl is to take the bind off edge, grab it with my left hand, take my right hand, and kind of just, I don't know what this word is, squeeze it, and then turn it into almost like a cowl. So you wrap it, and then you wrap it, and then you wrap it. And this is the great thing about having an accessory that has a sexy backside, a nice wrong side, because then you get to see both sides of it and you can play with the point as well. You can leave it tucked in or you can accentuate it more. The cool thing about wearing a shawl this way, great for a jacket, doesn't fall off, and of course gives you that cozy hug. Any questions on how to wear? No? I'm seeing some hearts come up, the cozy Malabrigo hug. Yes, 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 yes. Awesome. Well, I have to say, if there are any other instruction questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we are at that stage where we can stay on. I'm going to stop the recording. So if you're watching on a video, if you're watching afterwards, happy knit along, happy Orienta shawl, happy all the things. I hope you learned something. I hope you had some fun. I hope you kind of worked through the knitting process as you went along with the pattern. And yes, Teresa, even though you struggle a bit at different parts, the challenge is there. Again, it's the process. So I'm going to go ahead, say goodbye to those who are watching on the recording. I'm going to stop recording. And if we want to go ahead and show our shawls for those that are here live, feel free. So thank you.